Welcome to Powerboat Talk, the podcast where we talk everything performance boats with your host, Joe Road.
Hello, welcome to Powerboat Talk. This episode is brought to you by SoCal Jet Boats with owners Brad and Brittany Martin. I had the pleasure of having Brad on episode 28 of Powerboat Talk, so go check that out. SoCal Jet Boats was one of the original online forums and is still a great resource for all kinds of performance boat info. SoCal Jet Boats also has an online store that has a fantastic selection of hot boat apparel. SoCal Jet Boats is also a great supporter of boat racing out here on the West Coast, and you can find them at most ADBA and NJBA drag boat races. Follow SoCal Jet Boats on Instagram and Facebook, or go to SoCalJetBoats.com for more information. Hello and welcome to Powerboat Talk. I just wanted to give you a little disclaimer on this episode with Alan Stoker from Stoker Boats, which I'm really excited to finally get done. I recorded this episode a couple months after the 2024 Parker Enduro, last year's Enduro, in which Alan won, but I had some real technical difficulties with the recording, and just been really busy this last year with work, and so anyhow, it's taken me this long to get it patched up and back out to you. So hopefully I'll get back on a good cadence for getting episodes out, and thank you for your patience, and hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to Powerboat Talk. Today I have, of course, another very special guest. I've got Alan Stoker of Stoker Boats, who was just recently the winner of the Parker Enduro for the third time in a row. And I got a chance to see Alan out there and talk to him, and he's gracious enough to take a call for me. And so looking forward to talking to Alan today. Alan's coming to us from his home in Hickory, North Carolina, where he lives on Lake Hickory. And how you feeling? You all recovered from that 4 hours in a cockpit?
No, not really. Still a little sore, but yeah, a lot of that is I've had back issues for many years, so being strapped in that long, it takes its toll. Yeah. So, it'll be okay. Yeah, the last couple of years was the same way, so no big deal.
How tall are you? You're a tall guy.
Just shy of 6'4".
Oh my gosh, man! Holy cow!
Well, you're not little either, there, Joe.
Yeah, but I'm not strapping myself into a canopy like that.
Yeah, that's made for somebody 5'10".
Yeah. There's a reason all those F1 guys are 130 pounds, right?
True. Most of them, anyway.
Yeah. So I talked to you before the race, and you were a little, I don't know what the word is. I don't want to be harsh, but you were a little bit nervous. I don't know, nervous, but you had been promised a co-driver, and I guess at the last minute that didn't work out. So you were faced with doing the 4 hours again by yourself.
Yeah, it's I guess tense. I've always been one to get a little nervous before a race, but I knew what it was going to be like sitting in it for 4 hours. And yes, we had a co-driver lined up, and he's part of an F1 H2O team that, as you know, tours good part of the world. Mm-hmm. And they added a race in China, and he couldn't get back in time. So that meant I drove the whole way, which was okay. The boat's just, it was never intended for the engine that's on it, and it was a one-off custom build to try and see if we could make it handle. And, in a straight line, we've got it decent, but going around the arcs in the river, and especially the corners, the heavy engine and all that weight being up high, the boat's a little touchy to drive. So we didn't want to just have, anybody co-drive. So that kind of limited our choices, and, it is what it is. It all worked out good. And, whether or not we run again, that's hard to tell yet at this point.
Now, I didn't even know about the driver. You want to say who it was?
RJ West.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, somebody that's got, lots of go fast experience. And, when we called him, if he wanted to, he was all for it. It would have been a little bit of a chore because he's quite a bit smaller than I am, but we when the boat was built, Greg Foster and I were going to drive it. And unfortunately, as most know, Greg passed away due to complications with cancer. Mm-hmm. The capsule come out of his wrecked Seabold, and when it was put into this boat, we put mounts for a second seat in it right away, so that it would be a quick change to go from one driver to the other. Mm-hmm. But RJ's smaller than Greg, so we were going to have to adapt again.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I had Bob Brown on my podcast a few months ago, and he told me a story about how you got in to drive the 9-hour with you one time, and there was a seat issue. He told me how you he said, "Don't worry, we got you covered," and then you propped him in pillows or something, and it sounded like it was a crazy story.
Yeah, I remember when Bob drove with me at early 80s, and I thought we had an adjustable seat in it. That could have been a different year, because there was one year there we actually had a seat on a slide that could slide back and forth for the different co-driver. Mm-hmm. But, back then, as you remember, it was all open cockpits then, so you didn't have to worry about belts, and made different sized drivers much easier than in a safety cell.
Yeah. Interesting. So, and the engines, it's a 450, right?
Yeah, it's a Mercury 450R, which has the motors run the 3 years with multiple oil changes. I think it's changed 4, maybe 5 times now. Firm belief oil's cheap compared to parts. And other than, in 23, we had some issues going into Guardian mode, but we were set up for the course at the upper end that was straighter, so we didn't have to, I call it, bend the boat around some of the corners. And when they switched back to the blue water and had some issues because of that were putting us into Guardian. So we had changed that for this year, so no more Guardian problems, but we were having alternator problems, or we believe it to be alternator problems. I haven't been able to check it yet. That about 45 minutes into the race, I started getting battery voltage warnings, and so we changed battery at the first pit stop. Didn't solve it, so we just basically, at the end of the race, we were down to 11.8 volts, where we were at 14.4 when we started. The new battery, went in right off the charger, so we had 12.8, and it slowly went down. And basically, once that started, the fans in the safety cell had to be turned off, so that didn't help. But other than that, the engine has been flawless.
Yeah. When you run, the boat looks flawless. You're just putting in laps, man, just on rails. And I guess this year too, you got off to a bad start. I think you had some problems just getting in gear right out of the gate. So you were kind of coming from behind for most of the race.
Yeah, correct. It's because of all the electronics on those engines, no way to get around the starting gear. At least nothing we found at this point. And so it's start it, and you got to wait for the RPM to drop, put it in gear, and go. Well, when it went into gear or didn't go into gear, I don't know for sure if the engine died when I went in, or if it just didn't go in, other than nothing happened. And when I tried to do it a second time, still nothing. So I had to turn the ignition and everything off and let it do a reset that takes a few seconds, fire it, and then it left. But by that time, out of the 38 boats, I think we were 37th
off
the beach, but we were 14th at the first turn.
Oh
So
my
I got
gosh.
around a lot of people, but when you're having to come from behind like that, you got to go through all the dirty water.
How hard is it to be like with the speed limit? There's a 110 mile an hour speed limit, but how hard is it to stay patient when you're behind like that and you were getting there, but it was a slow process. That's got to be hard.
Well, it's the 110 part's not so much an issue because we had the boat set up to where it basically would run 110 and that's all it would go.
Okay.
We had setups that would run a fair amount more, but you can't use it. So then you got to pay too close of attention. So we get to the point where, we might change the engine height an eighth of an inch.
Oh, no kidding. It makes sense.
Yeah. Well, because that gear case is pretty big. And, we go out and test and we might go back as John Roth, the boat's owner's got a nice building there that we work out of, and file on the propeller.
Wow.
Just a little tiny bit to slow the prop down.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
To where, you're allowed, it's 110 limit, but they don't penalize you until 110.99. You go over that. Well, we came in all three times 110.1.
Nice.
In the 3 years, we have come in between 109 to 110.2 at every pit stop through the 3 years.
Wow.
And we spend, a fair amount of time to do that because trying to sit with your throttle, like trying to go down the road in your car, trying to hold it at 65 and not, oops, I just went 66. It's extremely difficult. And then you end up paying, in my opinion, too much attention to that instead of where you're going, who you're coming up to pass, or who, might be alongside you. And I just don't think that's as safe. So we spend a very large portion of our test time, once we have everything else dialed in, or as good as we can get it, making sure we can't break out.
That's a good strategy, I think. Just take that out of your mind.
Yeah, I mean, it has hurt us in a couple areas. I know it's hurting us a little on acceleration because what we're doing to the prop to hold it back just a little bit makes it want to slip a little bit off the corner. So I got to be a little bit more careful coming off the corner to not unhook the prop. But, when you know that, it's not that big a deal. And Chad at Signature Propellers has been extremely helpful. I spent time with him, laying out what we wanted to build, and he's built us what we've asked for and been extremely close to what we wanted before we even touched them.
Nice. That's nice. Well, cool. And I was just looking the other day at the winners chart, and I think if I have it figured out right, there's only one guy that's won 4 times in a row. One of your old competitors, Todd Bowden. So I don't know. Does that motivate you at all?
Yeah, a little bit. That was back when the race was different and it was run up at out of Avia. And but still, I think it was 2 hours then. I don't remember for sure because we didn't go, but as you know, in years past, Greg and I drove for Todd's dad. So I know the Bowden family very well. And when I found out that RJ couldn't make it, I actually called Todd.
Did you really?
Yeah, just to see, and never actually got in touch with him. But he would have been a good person to put in the boat.
Yeah, that would have been, because that would have been fun.
Yeah, he doesn't, or back when he was running, he didn't wreck stuff, didn't tear up equipment. And in an endurance race, that's a big part of it, is knowing when to be easy on the throttle, when to be aggressive, because if you're not around at the end,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter how good you run.
Right. So, well, that would have been good. So, I've known you for years because my dad, like your dad, we had boat shops and we were Evinrude dealers.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I don't know at what point did you always grow up working for the shop, or when did you start getting into this?
Oh, well, when Dad started the shop, I was 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd come off a dairy farm in what is now called Cerritos in California. It's now Cerritos. It was Dairy Valley then. And he drug me to work on Saturdays through the summer months. And, basically, as soon as I was old enough to drive, I had a half an hour from when school got out to where I had to be to work. So I, like you, grew up around it. And, when I was in college was kind of when the economy took a dive, and, the family needed help at the shop. So I left school and went back to work. And that was in, when was that? 1978. And I worked there full time from 78 to when we decided enough was enough, the end of 2014.
So I know, and that's funny because that's 78 when my dad started, and I was 16 or 17. So I got a little later start, but same thing, like after school. I played basketball, but when it wasn't basketball season, it was like, you were at the shop, and that's just what you did. But obviously, I was into hot rods too. So the hot rod boats, obviously early on, I mean, that was a cool thing. My dad raced earlier. When he got to shop and stuff, he couldn't race in. But how did you get into the high performance stuff? Because was the shop doing it, or was that kind of like a side thing for you?
When we were on the dairy farm still, my dad was part of the crew for the Hustler jet boat that held the world water speed record for many years. He put the engine in that boat. And he had the second fiberglass Mandela.
Oh, no kidding.
So to the point, it didn't even have a deck mold yet.
Uh-huh.
It had a wood deck on it when we were on the dairy farm, had a Tri-Power 389 Pontiac in it.
Uh-huh.
And gosh, about 4 years before we decided enough was enough, I came into work on a Monday morning, hadn't worked that Saturday, and here sat an old Mandela that looked awful, had been left outside, that Dad had bought.
Oh my
So
gosh.
this reminds me, it had a Pontiac in it. We stripped the thing down to raw glass, had to take most of the gel coat even off of it, and looked darn near like a new boat when we were done. Rebuilt the motor and never put it in the water because Dad just wanted to have it.
Right.
And then actually it had a gentleman come in the shop that wanted to buy it. And I said to Dad, well, we need room. You're not using it. I'm going to sell that thing. He looked at me and said, oh, okay, go ahead. So sold it.
Oh, no.
But yeah, so Dad had always been into hot rod stuff.
Oh, okay.
So that was kind of a natural thing. It took a while. Most of what we did first was, smaller boats, smaller engines, and progressively got more into the high performance side. But as I'm sure with you and your dad, that wasn't really what paid the bills.
Right.
Why we, did lots of normal everyday type service work and sold a variety of different fishing boats and cruisers through the years, because that's what kept the doors open.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we built a ski race boat one time, and that was all horse trading money, used parts money, and I'll never forget the time we plumbed it all in AN stuff, and my dad started counting the bills, and he's like, "Okay, I'm never going to count those invoices again. I don't want to know."
Yeah,
that was our foray. We didn't get it not nearly as hardcore as you, but yeah, absolutely, yeah. The stock stuff was where the money is, and that's what you could turn around and flat rate it, and that's how you paid the bills.
Yep. I liked playing with, hot rodding various different outboard engines, and through the years, we put in our own machine shop that we could do pretty much anything we wanted. Mm-hmm. It had a Superflow dyno toward the last few years that we could do development work, beat on them, whatever you want to look at, but to further product that we were selling. So that was fun. That was the fun part of the business, mm-hmm. doing that. And, I enjoyed building the new boats because every one was a little bit different. Mm-hmm. There was always something changed, whether it was what the customer wanted or as we continued to try and further the product, some little changes that most times customers wouldn't notice, mm-hmm. because it might have been in different materials that became available that Eliminator then, who was doing all our layups, mm-hmm. gave us the option of using. So there were some real subtle changes through the years just because progress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you got the Superflow and you started doing more and more engine work, I mean, that came from your racing probably, right? It was racing first, you got better at that stuff, and then you got a customer base out of it probably, right?
Yeah, I remember one year at the Havasu Classic Mod VP race where besides my own engine, there was 6 customer engines running the race. Mm. So out of the 38 or 39 boats that were in the race, 7 of the engines were engines that were built through the shop.
Interesting. That had
the majority of which
that had to be a little stressful, racing against knowing there's 5 or 6 other guys out there.
No, not. It was part of business, and mm-hmm. out of those, the only engine that broke during the race was my own. Broke a crankshaft and had to change a crank between day 1 and day 2, which mm-hmm. put us behind. But we did our best to build them all the same. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would at times, if I wanted to try something different, it was always tried on my own stuff first, because we're firm belief that you don't experiment on your customer's dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely the way to do it. And of course, for people who don't know, I mean, it was always Johnson Evinrude stuff, right?
The majority of it was. Mm-hmm. When Bowden switched from OMC product to Mercury, we were doing a lot of his Mercuries.
Okay. Yeah.
People didn't necessarily know because we kind of kept it a little quiet because we were, an Evinrude dealer, but Fred was buying boats from us. So when he wanted that, sure.
Yeah, right.
But that was kind of a steep learning curve because we were doing stuff a little different than what was available. Mm-hmm. And that was basically, Fred wanted to win. He said, mm-hmm. So you got an idea. He said, you want to try it? Try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah. Now, those are the kind of customers that have, right, where they want you to experiment on their stuff because if it gets them somewhere, they're fine paying for it.
Well, and that's, John Roth, who owns the boat that we've been running at the Enduro. When we decided to do that project, we were going to build another 20, but then when COVID came, we couldn't get materials, so that kind of got scrapped. As you remember, 2018, Greg wrecked the 20 we'd been running, which we had won the race a couple times with that one as well. We decided we'd build this 224, and it was decided before the project even started, that it would be, built with the best of materials we could get. But it was also that if the boat didn't behave, that he would scrap it. And when we first did it, we got pretty close to scrapping it because it did not drive very good. And so we made multiple changes, one at a time until we got it drivable. And it's still, we've had, the bottom was different this year than it was the last 2 years.
Oh, no kidding.
Each year we've had some change on the bottom. This year's had 2 changes to the bottom. And trying to get it to drive better with that heavy engine on the back. The boat was designed around a engine that weighed 550 pounds. This, what's on it now, is 750 pounds. That's why the engine is straight up against the back of the boat, which gotcha. I don't believe in a lot of setback. Anyway, the safety cell is shoved as far forward as we can get it. I don't know how close you look, but there's nothing mounted against the back. Everything is moved forward. There's ballast up underneath the nose. We've got lead strategically placed in some different places in the boat, trying to improve the handling. And that's to say, we've got it pretty decent down the straightaway when the water's good, but it's a handful, and got to be really careful going around the corner. And our boats have always turned extremely good. And this, you can feel it try and roll to the outside. Kind of starts a little bit before halfway around a corner. And it's just, that heavy, top heavy engine trying to go straight when you're turning. And, we're working on it. We're making a little bit here, a little bit there, but we go forward and then we go backwards.
Yeah.
And, it's something we're continuing to work on, but if the boat was wider, it'd be a lot easier.
Yeah. I see you, I think there's a Stoker boat owners forum or something, and you pop on there about once a week because some guy's saying, hey, I want to put a 400 on this, or I want to put in, you're like, no. But
well, we did through the years, Dad and I did a lot of testing, and, we would go to the water, sometimes with minimal interior, and we'd take bags of water softener salt, because those plastic bags are hard to open, and we would move those around in the boat. And yes, we built them with a stern drive that weighs more, but that engine's in the boat. It's not all hanging off the back, and they're lower, so you can't really compare weight to weight. We even strapped weight on top of the engine cowlings to see how higher up weight affected cornering. So when these people go wanting to do some of these things, well, these engines weren't out yet. No, but we did testing with equivalent weight, very close to where the weight is going to be with that engine, so that I know what it's going to act like. And there's been a few that have done it anyway,
of course,
most of which end up taking the engine's back off, and I'll get a little private message that, yeah, you're right, it didn't like that.
And, as a boat manufacturer, you've got that other variable. You've got the knucklehead behind the wheel variable, because you got to make sure this thing, it can't be, just touchy. I mean, it's got to be foolproof. The guy drinking, throwing it in corners of 4 people in the boat, Well,
exactly. And that's, what I've tried to explain in some of those posts, that, that big variable. We can't control who's behind the wheel. And, the person that owns the boat, that's got lots of seat time in it, and I stress the might be able to do it. But what happens if one of their friends that doesn't have a lot of time in it, or like you said, they're out and they've had a couple? Now you got a problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, that's kind of why this, like I said, this project on this one we've been racing, why we have been making all these changes is that, I've told them that, if we find a change that works and makes the boat to where the average boater can get in it and not have a problem, that we would publish what those changes are.
Sure.
But it would be stuff where then you've got to have someone that is capable of actually making those bottom changes or those weight distribution changes. At this point, it's both. But like I said, we're still working. And, each time we try something, whether it works or it doesn't work, we learn something. And a couple of times it has headed us down a different path.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly an interesting project. So keep your mind working.
Yeah. And I like doing stuff like that. And, fortunately, the gentleman that owns the boat, John, he likes doing that sort of stuff too. He wants to win, obviously, but he allows me to make the changes that I think might help.
Mm-hmm.
And when some of them haven't worked and I've had to take them back off, he's okay with that.
Yeah. Well,
his only really stipulation is when you're done, it needs to look like it was factory.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, we made a fairly significant change this year. Well, we made two, but the second one was done. I started it on the Saturday before the race, and I finished it Wednesday night.
Oh my gosh!
So I laid underneath the boat on my back and worked, and it was all gel coated when we were done, so you couldn't see it unless you really knew what you were looking at, because that's one of his stipulations, and I have no problem with that. And it took that long I knew what changes I wanted to make. All the stuff was pre-made before we even got there. So and it still takes that long. So that's obviously of concern. If we do figure out something, is making sure, getting it through to the people that, hey, in order for it to work, you have to do these things.
Right. So, well, at the end of the day, I mean, it's if it does work that way, I mean, because man, these new motors are incredible. So I can understand people sitting on the sideline going, man, I really want one of those things, Well,
and that's where that's the other agreement that John signed paperwork that when and if this boat gets converted to a recreation boat, if there is any questions as to whether or not we got it working right with that 450, it will get re-rigged with a 300. Mm-hmm. The 300R is considerably lighter. There's quite a few customers or old customers that have done repowers, and that's in the weight and the horsepower the boat was originally intended to. Is, as you know, going fast is one thing, but you got to do it safely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've seen too many accidents through the years, heard of too many people getting hurt, that I don't want to see that happen.
Yeah, right. Well, you're doing it, you guys are doing it the right way. You've obviously got the knowledge and you've got the finances to do it the right way and spend the time to do it right. So
it's John's finances, not mine. It's my time and my my knowledge, and it's pretty much other than trying to keep people safe and still wanting to learn, even though we're not in the business and, really haven't been for, it's 10 years now. That doesn't mean I don't want to see people still out having fun, but doing it safely.
Mm-hmm. So when you guys did finally get into, you started racing the V-bottom boats, I think, didn't you start with Baker's?
Well, originally started, even at the shop. Dad ran the Enduro a couple of times with a 18-foot Patterson with a 500-inch Hemi Chrysler in it.
Oh, I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Never did very well. It had engine trouble each time, but the thing ran really good when it ran. And then we ran, I started in kneel down, smaller stuff. Ron Hill had a boat that I ran it a couple of times, ended up buying the boat. And so we did that for a while. Then when the V6s first came out in 1976, we bought we called it the Plug. It was a fiberglass bottom that had been used to build a new mold off of that Kona had.
Oh my gosh.
And we put a wood deck on it, glassed the deck, and we put a 200 on it and ran it at the Enduro.
Oh my gosh.
Dad, myself, and a old customer named Galen, we each took our turn in it. Then I don't know if it was the following year or 2 years after that. No, it was 77. I drove a 100-inch tunnel boat at the Enduro, and Dad drove that same boat by himself. So he drove the whole 7 hours. And then in 1978, we had a gentleman by the name of Earl McKinney come into the shop. He had run an inboard at the Enduro and had issues. And we built him a 19-foot Witchcraft with a 235. That he drove one leg at the Enduro in 78. I drove the other 3 legs. And he never drove the boat again other than playing.
Mm-hmm.
And that year we won 12 out of 13 races that boat was entered in.
Wow.
In Havasu in 78, he actually built a second boat, and John Soares drove that one. And then after that, the one I was driving was pretty busted up because it was really rough. That they were taking bets we wouldn't be back for day 2s. We were leading. We finished glassing doing the repair works at Campbell's shop there in Havasu at 6 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
And went on to win the race by 2 laps, but the boat had more patches in it, and it was just de-rigged and hauled to the dump after that. And at that point was when we built the 20-foot V-bottom, and we had been a Kona dealer, and then Jerry went from Kona to Baker, and so we were a dealer for him. And we built the Plug and the mold, and then had a deal with Jerry to where we had rights for certain areas. And then we did the first Mod BP style boat for him, ran that. First race we ran that was in St. Louis. 81 or 82, somewhere in there. But then when Jerry wasn't honoring his end of the deal, and we knew we could make the bottom better, that's when we decided to build our own and did a deal with Eliminator that they laid them up for us. And the first one of those was, November of 1982.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, I mean, it was a V-bottom class, right? And then at some point, somebody showed up with something with a little bit of tunnel, and then yeah, maybe it was an eliminator, and they just then it got crazy, right? And that's kind of how it evolved, right? But initially, it was V-bottoms, right?
You're right. The class kind of started as V-bottoms, and then pretty much on the West Coast, I think one of the first ones to actually do it was Alan Miller. Sold his Clastron Carlson he was running and showed up with a 19 Eliminator Daytona. And, well, no, that's not true. Prior to that, Fred Bowden showed up in 1978 at the Enduro with a Taylor. And that's when we met Fred. So that was actually the first one. Early on, there was a few different ones, but none of them were getting around a corner very good. So they ended up being fairly comparable performance-wise. So it was basically, they were allowed from the very beginning or very early on, and bottom technology just progressed to where now we had Mod VP style boats that would go around a corner and had a speed advantage. The only one really at the time that was comparable speed-wise was some of the different Allisons, but it took a very special person behind the wheel to keep one balanced, because they run with nothing on the water. Probably one of the best at doing that was Glenn Reynolds. He ran some of the old IOGP races with one, and he never won one of them, but he finished top 3 or 4 multiple times. When we were running that Baker V bottom and Miller showed up, we had been able to beat the Taylors. When Miller showed up, he had enough speed advantage on us, even though we could get around the corner better than him, we couldn't beat him. Or when we did, it was close. So Dad and I decided that we thought we could make a Mod VP style boat turn. We felt comfortable what was causing them not to turn. So then we took the V-bottom mold and put inserts in the mold and laid up a boat with those inserts, and then we glued surfboard foam to the bottom, got it shaped where we thought would work, and we actually ran it that way at Golden Avenue when you could still run there, and it turned pretty good, but it didn't want to turn to the right. So we made a couple of changes there, and it didn't take a good set going straight, so we made a change to handle that, and those changes worked. So we built the mold, went to St. Louis with a boat that had been out of the mold for 3 days, and won the race with it. And that was kind of the change. And as things progressed, and having issues with Baker, and we were comfortable we could make it better, so we went back and started again. And if someone really looks close, you got to look pretty darn close. The stuff we build, the port side of the boat is a little bit different than the starboard side, and that was mainly trying to counteract the right-hand rotation propeller. That equal and opposite reaction. When that prop comes down and bites, it wants to twist the boat a little bit. So we made the bottoms ever so slightly different from one side to the other to try and compensate that. We continued to learn, and the ones that we ran at the end, and some of the people that are still going to the Enduro have made those changes that we had found that helped the boat for racing, but hurt the boat as a recreation boat. Made it to where you had to pay a little more attention driving them, but it was worth ever so slight on a lap time. That, like my personal boat, I have a 1985 20-footer that, when we sold the shop, I had a 22 stern drive that I last minute, they had a guy come in, wanted to buy it, so sold it to him. And then this particular 20 was one that John Roth had owned for many years. He wasn't the original owner, but he was close to it. And he had brought it into the shop, and we had stripped it, sandblasted, painted the trailer. Holes that didn't need to be there that had been added through the years got filled in, gel coated. It got all new wiring, new gauges, new steering, new jack plate, new interior, color sanded, buffed. So it was completely re-rigged. And it got run one time after that because John had multiple boats. And so I bought that boat back from him 2019, 2020, something like that. You know, if you're standing back 15 feet, you'd swear it's a brand new boat. It was taken extremely good care of. The only stress marks it's got on it is there's a brace that runs down the center of the deck, and then I think someone walking on the deck may have slipped and fallen on the deck. So it's got two little stress marks that you got to look to find them, and that's the only marks in the thing. So while the boat, you know, had some time on it, the boat wasn't abused.
Well, man, I just remember that at some point, man, Mod VP just got crazy. Just was the most popular thing. I mean, every event was like, who was going to win this week, and you know, yeah, it had to be a really fun time to be in the racing.
Oh yeah, I can remember 43, 45 boats at the Havasu race in the early 80s, and there was, I think, one year at St. Louis there was over 30, you know, where we had to pare the field down, where we had to run elimination heats to get it pared down to, I don't remember back then if we ran 15 or 20 boats in the main, but you know, that was on a course that was like 43, 44 seconds to go around. So you put even 15 boats on something like that, it gets a little dicey. So yeah, early on there was a bunch of competitors. And I think even up to the last couple of years of the Havasu Classic, when Mod VP ran 2 hours, 2 different days, there was still 30 plus boats.
Yeah, and for, you know, people like us who were Evinrude dealers, yeah, it was really cool seeing an Evinrude, you know, that was competitive, and you were kind of one of the only ones in the field, I believe, at the time, or at least at some point in time, right?
Well, in the late 70s and early 80s, the majority of the field was OMC. Then, you know, Mercury got more involved and came out with their Mod VP motor. That kind of switched things because now the people could buy an engine already modified for racing out of the box, where the ones with Evinrudes, you know, some of them would run them out of the box, but if you wanted to be competitive, that engine had to have a fair amount of work done to them that, you know, got expensive, and then they didn't last as long. And so it kind of switched over a little bit somewhere, 83-ish, somewhere in there.
And then if I recall, you didn't really get any factory support, whereas the Mercury guys did.
Depends what you call factory support. Basically, through the years, as things progressed, and I got to know more of them because they would be at the races, I got information. If I could call and say, hey, I want to try this, what do you think? You know, I knew the right people that could give me the right information, or if I wanted to try something and they had tried it, they would say yes or no. And I remember one of those phone calls when we were running, you know, modified 235s, we wanted to add finger ports in the block. So I called one of the engineers that I knew and said, hey, his name was Rick. I said, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And there's this long pause on the phone, and he goes, you know, never thought about trying that, but that might be worth trying. So we did it, and it helped. So then I let them know, and later on, they were letting others know. But at that point, we were probably, if not the only Evinrude in the pits, one of a couple. So there wasn't a lot of people doing it. And then, they came out with a different crank that I got one of the first ones of those, but we paid for it. And that crank lasted 6 hours and it broke in half. So they did give me a new one for free. I didn't have to pay for the second one, but it destroyed the block. And I had to buy another block. I didn't get a replacement block, but, and then the very end, IOGP, if I needed parts, I got some help on the parts, but not much. A set of pistons or some gaskets here and there was pretty much the extent of it. A lot of people thought they were doing all our motor work. They weren't. We were building all our own motors.
And then again, you had the guys on the other side of the fence, right? The Mercury guys, they were getting factory support.
Well, they were supporting a lot of people that, they had engines built for the series at that point. But I do know too, there was one year at St. Louis when it was one boat after another backing up to the Mercury truck, getting different engines put on. And Dad and I standing there going, man, here we are, the lone guys doing our own, and these guys are backing up, getting motors dumped on them. But we kind of, in some ways, liked that. It was kind of, okay, we're enough of a threat that they're doing that. It, kind of boosted our ego, shall we say. And a lot of people thought that Rourke Summerford STV boats and I were enemies and hated one another. We didn't. We were just both, hard competitors. And he and I still stay in touch to this day. And when Foster was running the tunnel boat, Rourke and I were both on the crew. And people would say, we thought you two hated one another. And we just laugh. And it just, neither one of us liked to lose. And since those days, he and I have talked about the different things we tried and how important little things were in changing performance. Like 1/8 of an inch adjustments on engine height, an extra 4 or 5 hours worth of work on the gear case, just finding all the little imperfections and getting those things taken care of, and how important a good prop guy was. Like back then, for the majority of those times, we ran stuff from John May's, our Mazco propellers. And, Rourke and I talked about, being able to tell the prop guy what you needed the prop to do.
Yeah, so guys like you and Rourke, I mean, you guys were just so in tune to what was going on with the boat, and you could do stuff like that, right? You came to the prop guy with exactly what he needed to hear. You kind of spoke his lingo. So I guess it was guys like you that were really the most competitive.
The same guys were pretty much always going to be, in my opinion, the fast ones, because those were the guys that put in the extra time testing, where, the guys that were getting beat, wow, they're spending a lot more money on engines. Well, it wasn't so much spending more money on engines, spending more on propellers, but getting the prop guy the right information.
Well, and I imagine, in those early days, those bottoms were really evolving. You guys kind of all started from scratch on them. So I'm sure there was a lot that had to do with bottom development and modifications on the bottom.
Yeah. Like detail on the bottom of the boat and having edges that were so sharp they would cut you, that you can't build them that sharp in a mold. So that takes time, and it's those little things that add up. Might take 10 little things to gain a mile an hour or 1/10 of a second off your lap time. But that's what it took back then, because the class was so competitive to win. And it, in 1986, Mod VP switched from modified engines to production engines that you could change a flywheel and put fiberglass reeds in. That was it. Well, the Mercury's got to cut the cylinder heads because they were a smaller displacement than the OMC engines. And everybody, oh, well, now different people are going to win. It wasn't. It was the same people, same guys, because those same guys did the homework.
It had to be really hard always running as the underdog against all the other black motored guys. And, were you ever tempted to switch over? Or at one point, when did you ever switch over?
When Mercury decided to set up what they called high performance only dealers, we were actually approached by them to do that, to the point we had rented another building on the other side of the street from where the shop was. And then but part of that deal was they would give us that high performance dealership if we switched. And then some other dealers in the area got wind of that, Mercury dealers, and put it to a stop, which was okay. I mean, it didn't really upset us. In some ways it helped. We got to know some of the people at Mercury instead of, being enemies, shall we say. And, it didn't work out, but yeah, there was, and I don't remember what year that was, where we almost ended up switching engines. And that boiled down to, okay, now we have Evinrude and Mercury that we can put on the boats, no problem, where prior to that, probably 75, 80% of what we built were Evinrude powered, because when someone come in and wanted a Mercury, we had to go to another dealer to buy the engine. We didn't say, no, we won't do it. We would explain, well, if you have a warranty issue, we can help you on the Evinrude. We can't on the Mercury. We'll have to send you to the dealer we bought it from. Whereas if we became that high performance dealer, then we could have done the warranty work for them, because we tried to take that outlook that, selling it is good, but you got to make sure you take care of it afterwards.
Yeah. And you definitely want to take care of people. You don't want to do work and send them on down the road without ever being able to take care of them again. But yeah, I could see that. And also, for people that don't know, I mean, in those days, if you were good, I mean, warranty work was good money. It was consistent work. It was a lot of work. So you definitely wanted to make sure you could do warranty work.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because contrary to what a lot of people think or even do, is if you've got certified techs, warranty pays pretty good. And it's generally, in most cases, depending on what your dealer rating was, a phone call to warranty, go, hey, this is what I got going on. This is what I need. A couple of days later, it shows up.
Yeah. And when you do it long enough, and they know that they can trust you and you're honest, yeah, they just send you more warranty work.
Yeah. And every once in a while you might get checked, but once you got on the, shall we say, the good side, where they knew you weren't trying to file warranty claims that were bogus, they took care of you. And it became an easy process.
And again, man, especially with the popularity of the sport, and you had a lot of, you had new guys coming all the time, and man, some of the best guys ever that you raced against at that time. So who were some of the guys that were like your toughest competitors?
Any of the boats that Rourke built that he was helping to support, not necessarily financially, but knowledge. Guys like Ted Griguch, that was in Canada, ran one of his. Charlie Anderson did. Ray Anderson did. I still talk to Ray and his son these days. His son is now driving an F1 boat. And, Chip Watkins that was running one of ours, you always knew he was going to be, up front because he ran hard and did his homework, whether it was when he was driving for himself or when he started driving for Fred Bowden. So yeah, there was lots of different guys. And, if you were traveling the series, you knew when you got there and you looked who was there, who the fast guys were. You just knew because they'd show up ready to run. And that's not necessarily, the guy that's got the big trailer and a bunch of different engines and props. It's, in some cases it was someone showing up with the bare minimum of stuff, but that stuff was all dialed in to the best it could be.
Given how methodical and maniacal you were about, tuning and propellers and trying new stuff. I mean, you ever think about, if you had some of the technology back then that you had now to help you diagnose, help you troubleshoot, help you, kind of see how things are working?
Yeah. If had GoPros and such back then, it'd be interesting. We've got, I got a few old VHS tapes that maybe I should get transferred to DVD, but yeah, it would have been nice to have that. Like, the last several years, or ever since started driving for John, we've had various GoPros on the boat. And we were actually, from this last Enduro, had a new one that had some new technology in it that kept the frame really still. And we watched part of it after the race there at his house in Parker, and some of the guys in the crew were, oh man, we had no idea that thing moves around that much. Because the camera is, no matter what the boat did, the camera was never moved, or the what it was recording stable as can be. So the horizon never changed, which allowed you to really see how much the boat moves. And they basically, to the T, went, oh crap, we never realized that. I've been telling you guys, you have no idea how much some of this different stuff moves around. And even in that video, you could see halfway through the corner, the boat go from leaning to the inside to center, to then lean into the outside a little bit, showing that weight transfer. Even though, taking it easy and being careful in the corner, you could see it in the video, where had that camera not had that feature in it, you probably wouldn't have noticed it.
Wow. Cool. So when do we get to see those videos?
Well, one of the guys that works for him is editing it, and at some point we might post some little pieces of it. I've got, it's maybe 2 minutes from, it's either on the second or third lap. It's really early, going across some of the rough water, where you can literally, the camera's mounted on the deck. You could hear how hard the bottom hit a couple of times going across some of the rollers, where you could, even with the wind noise and all that, you could hear the thump on the bottom of the boat and go, yep, I felt that one.
Yeah, that's when you're reminded that you're 67 years old, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so again, man, you raced against some really, really legendary guys. Who was the guy that you probably respected the most and maybe didn't get to know as well? I wish you could go back and get to know him.
Ooh. Well, he's not with us anymore. Met him, but never, really sat down and discussed stuff. Renato Molinari. Yeah. Case Vandervelden and I talked a fair amount because I did some engine work for him, when he was still involved. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. But yeah, I think Renato would be the one that, everybody in the industry, in the go fast outboard industry knows him. That, we met, but that was pretty much it. Guys like Jimbo McConnell, I spent lots of time with him where he and I talked, and, great guy. And I actually saw him, it's 2 years ago now, but where he lives in Needles was across a little channel from where my family had a river place. And we sold it, I don't know, a year or so ago now. But so had Jimbo and I raced RC boats in that canal. Oh yeah. So, and he was still as competitive as ever. So yeah, I got through the years really fortunate to meet a lot of really neat people. Spent a fair amount of time with Seabolds, especially, there towards the end. That I remember that first year we ran that Baker at St. Louis. It was the first time we'd been to St. Louis, and in the rush trying to get the boat done, we got there, didn't have a paddle. So Dad went to Billy's shop to get a paddle, and Billy said, "We ain't selling anything to you Evinrude guys, and get out of here."
That's funny. That's really funny.
Oh yeah, so Dad's leaving, and we knew Freddie Hollenstein because we had pitted boat that he ran at Parker a couple of times with Ron Hill that had Evinrude power. So we knew Freddie from when he worked at OMC. And so Dad runs, this is how Dad told the story. I'm coming out the door, and Freddie's coming in and goes, "Hey, John, what's up?" And, "Well, came here to get a paddle, and I just got run out of the shop." And so Freddie says, "Turn around. We're going back in there." And he goes into Billy, and Freddie says, "Billy, John's a friend of mine. If he needs a paddle, sell him a damn paddle, would you?" Of course, who knows how accurate that story was, but I do remember saying something to Fred, and it goes, "Yeah, no problem." So I knew at least part of it was factual. But, when through the different years after that, got to know, Billy and Tim and Mike, not as much so, but always got along with those guys really good. And, Billy and I a couple of times talked a little bit about different running angles and how that affected things. And Rourke and I now quite a bit of, little radius here, what it makes the boat do, and, how important angles and little small things can be.
Man, your minds, they just never stop going. Wow. So what's Rourke up to these days?
No, after STV, he went to work for Earl Bentz, through Stratos and then Triton, where Rourke did a lot of bottom work for some of the bass boats that Earl was selling. And so he's still in the industry, and that, he talks to different people. And I know he and Earl Bentz still talk, and he lives a little ways out of Nashville. Not sure exactly what city, but been to his house, but that's 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, again, lots of brain power there between the two of you.
Well, I don't know necessarily brain power, but both of us remember a lot of the different things that we tried, and it's just fun to actually sit and talk about it. And where at times at some of the different races, there's been other people kind of around talking and go, no wonder you two guys ran fast. You tried stuff that we never even thought about. So, yeah, but a lot more often than not, those things we tried went the wrong direction. They don't see all those times, but like you said earlier, all of those things are what led to development of mod VP boats that were eventually produced for the public. And things that were learned that, like I said earlier, that some of the guys are doing now that we learned that helped for racing but hurt for production. So that's why Rourke had a couple of different bottoms for doing different things. And without that trial and error, you don't learn.
And yeah, man, even today, the impact on that mod VP class and the boats you guys came up with from that, like, it's just still glaring today, man. They're so popular, and just a big impact on the industry and performance outboards.
Oh yeah, it's a little over a year ago, we went and did a river run down in Florida, and all of the different boats that were there, not all, but 95% were outboard powered. That you're looking around as people are getting, their boats ready and launching and going, yeah, that's a boat that wouldn't have existed had it not been for mod VP. That one probably wouldn't. How much stuff came to be because of that? So it spurred a segment in the boating industry.
Yeah, and man, just great hot rods, right? Great, as affordable as boats can be now, and especially given how good the outboards are now. But man, to this day, like, you're probably been my most requested guest. People have been asking me when I'm going to have you on forever. So finally.
Oh, yeah. Would you just tell me? I've been asking, but he doesn't like doing those sort of things.
Yeah, and I imagine you showing back up at the Enduro again in the last few years, and winning races again and being at the spotlight. That's probably been kind of spurred kind of a resurgence.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things, like going back to the Enduro and running there, different people that come up that, go out to Parker just to see the race, that come up and talk, God, I remember back 30 years ago. And they remember more about, at times, what happened and what they're explaining, and go, oh man, I don't remember that.
Well, man, now that's a lot of stuff, buddy. What do you think? Anything we missed?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything. You've been around the industry for an awful long time as well, so a lot of the questions you knew how things had kind of transpired, and maybe not the details, but and that's a big part of the industry. It's the little details that a lot of people, they weren't necessarily privileged to know. And when I say privilege, they didn't know the right people. I remember your dad coming by the shop needing block board or something of that nature and doing some machine work for him. A long time ago now. It's in the 80s.
Well, man, your dad, Big John, man, him and my dad, they did a lot of horse trading together, and your dad was always really good to my dad. We really lived vicariously through. We didn't have the opportunity to do that kind of racing, and especially being Evinrude dealers, right? We were huge Evinrude fans, and we loved watching you beat the Mercs. So thanks for that.
Well, we enjoyed that. We used to go. One of the guys that worked for Mercury, that was at the IOGP race, his name was Mike Butler. One time we were leading, and Dad saw him pacing the dock. So as time went on, we would go to the races, and Dad would go over to Mike and go, hey, Mike, I got a new pair of tennies for you. And Mike would go, why? And Dad would, because we're going to make you pace the dock enough that you're going to wear them bitches out.
Oh man, I could totally see John saying that.
Oh yeah. He was an instigator in that respect. But the other side of that, Mike and I talk online still now. Here we are, 30 years later, and people that we probably never would have met that we still stay in contact with.
Yeah, we're kind of all part of the same fraternity, the sign that we're really all the same. It's kind of all on the same side.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we were in Bay City, Michigan one year, and we were having trim problems. And we had made, we had a single ram that went through the transom to the engine, and we ran a mercury trim pump, basically trying to get rid of a little bit of weight. And that was one of the things you were allowed to do. And so we went to the Mercury truck, said, hey, we need to buy a trim pump. And they said, can't sell you one. So I went and found Mike and said, hey, Mike, I need a trim pump. They won't sell me one. I said, it's one thing to beat us on the race course. It's another thing to beat us because we're stuck on a trailer. Mike walked over to the trailer, grabbed a trim pump, handed it to me. And I asked him, well, what do I owe you? He says, I don't want to beat you on the trailer either. You can have it. So, we had basically, through all of that, built respect, I guess would be one way to put it, to where, when the races were over, no matter which one of us won, it wasn't uncommon that we were all sitting at Billy Seabold's trailer because, Billy was sponsored by Bud Light, having a beer, talking about what had happened that weekend.
Oh, wow. Nice.
We were very fortunate basically to be in the industry when all of this development and advancements, shall we say, took place, and feel very fortunate to have gotten to take part of that.
And yeah, I just think we're really fortunate to have the Enduro back and healthy again the way it is, and with rules that allow more and more guys to come and play and be competitive.
Yeah, I think so. Too. And Ross Wallach has done a lot of work to keep the Enduro going, and he's been fortunate to have some pretty good sponsors. Randy Davis, Nordic is a big sponsor, and John Roth sponsors, and countless other people that without them helping Ross and the Blue Water Casino, the financing wouldn't be there to put all the people that do the work, even in a hotel room, because it's getting the insurance and the Coast Guard involved to secure the waterway, and there's just so much involved that without people like him that have put in a lot of work through the years, Seabold, Schubert's, so many others through the years, that without these people that have been dedicated to boating and boat racing, none of this happens.
Well, man, it was really good to see you and see you out there still going at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was good to see you too. It's been a long time, and I'm sure we'll be there in one capacity or another the next one, whether it's running or watching. Don't know at this point, but we'll for sure be there.
So, I mean, you think you're going to keep going? How many more years are you going to do this?
We'll see. Duff Daly and I have talked the last couple of years, and he went from driving the whole way, if they ran the whole way, to driving two legs and his son driving one, where now it's his son drives two legs and he drives one. But I think Duff's a couple of years older than I am, and I remember we were headed back to the ramp after the second pit stop, and I'm walking, trying to get loosened up a little bit, and walked past Billy Dunsmore, who had just got out of the Nordic, and Billy's, I think he's 70 or 71, so he's got me by 3 or 4 years. And Billy looks at me and he goes, "You're seriously going to get back in that thing?" He said, "I could hardly stand up. I only drove for a little over an hour." I go, "Yep." And he and I never really talked to him much at the awards. We were talking. He goes, "So how bad you hurt?" I said, "I don't know that I can sit on my bottom side." I said, "That's not feeling so good." I said, "So we're sore." And he goes, I said, "How about you?" And he goes, "Yeah." He says, "I got places that hurt I didn't know I had."
Funny.
I thought Duff was 70 and Billy was 71, but yeah, they're both there. I'm just shy of, and Duff still gets in a K-boat now and then. And he and I we were the first year we ran the boat, he kind of set it, and then I was talking to him and Mike Stock. Oh, I think it was Friday afternoon, and we were talking a little bit, and he had told me he was probably only going to drive the one leg. I said, "Yeah, I understand what you're saying. We're not young anymore." And he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, but you're sitting in a Cadillac compared to what we're sitting in." I go, "Yeah, you might think that until you actually get in it." And but yeah, again, there's people that been around it for a long time, got a lot of knowledge. And we did I don't know if you heard about, Gordy and I have been friends for ages, and we would FOF when he was working there. They did work for us on the four-stroke stuff, and Gordy's a little guy, and we'd always kid him. I mentioned it to one of the guys that helps us at the race, part of the crew that knows Gordy and Randy really well. And I said, "Yeah, one of these times we're going to have to," because Gordy's always complaining he can't reach the pedals in that Nordic, so they've got booster seat in it. So we were talking, Steve and I were talking about it, and I go, "Yeah, one of these days we're going to bring him a pair of tennies with some 4x4s on the bottom of them." Well, Steve goes to the store. He buys some pink and orange tennis shoes, paints 4x4s to match, screws them to the bottom of the tennies, and we're in the pits, and he brings them over. And I go, "Oh my God." I said, "You got to go give them to him." He says, "Oh, the hell, I'm giving them to him." He said, "You get to give them to him." And so okay, that's fine. Gordy will know I'm just messing with him. So walk over to their trailer, and it's all, the Nordic guys are there. But I said, "Hey, Gordy here." "No, why?" And I said, "Well, I got a present for him." And they look, and you can just see the look on their face when they see what I got in my hand. Well, they said, "Oh, he's over Duff's trailer talking to Duff and Mike." So I walk over there, and all the guys from Nordic follow me. And Gordy's there. There's 3 or 4 guys there talking. And I tap him on the shoulder, and I said, "Hey, I got a present for you. I'm hoping we'll solve your issue of not staying in the seat." And Gordy goes, "Well, we got that solved. We got booster cushion and all that now that's made into the seat. It's not a problem." And I go, "Well, maybe you should have these along just in case." And, "Well, what?" So I hand them to him. He looks at me, and everybody is just rolling laughing. And he looks at me and goes, "You son of a bitch, I'm going to get even for this." I go, "Oh, I know, it's going to be hell to pay." And I said, "I'm messing with you." He goes, "Oh, I know it." He said, "Not too many people that could give this to me that I wouldn't understand what they were doing." And so after the race, he posts a picture with him wearing them in their trailer. And if you go to Parker Enduro on Facebook, you go down and you find the Nordic where Gordy's thanking all the guys that were involved. He's got a picture of them with them on in the back of the trailer. And yeah, there was some sort of caption with it, if I remember right. And I saw that. I started laughing again, going, yeah, he definitely took that in stride. But it was, he and I talked at the awards too. He was sitting next to me and he goes, paybacks are a bitch, right? I go, yeah, that's cool. It's not a problem. I'll know you're messing with me just like I'm messing with you. And so then, I went to Steve, and Steve goes, well, do they know? And because Steve was on the other side of Duff, and I said to him, I said, yeah, they know. He goes, did you tell them? I go, nope. I said, all I said, it was one of the people that helps us that didn't have the what. And Gordy said, oh, Steve.
Yeah, Gordy's not admitting to that.
So, yeah, it was all obviously in fun. And, it was, Gordy's a good sport. He took it in fun. He knows we're just messing with him. But I know something's coming back. And, we show up Saturday morning, and 2 of the legs are missing off of our Easy Up. And it's duct tape to the pavilion there. So I walk over to Gordy. I go, okay, it didn't take you long to get even. He goes, what do you mean? I says, the legs on our Easy Up are missing. He said, wasn't me. Somebody else must have took them. We never did find out for sure who took them because we never got them back, but I still have my suspects. But yeah, there's a lot of good people involved, and a lot of people that put in a lot of work, to run the race and just to make sure that race happens.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Al, can't wait to hopefully see you there again next year. And
okay, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, man, and thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem.
All right, man, take care.
You too, Joe. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Powerboat Talk. If you like what you've heard, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. For more Powerboat Talk, follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or visit our website at powerboattalk.com. Thank you for listening to Powerboat Talk. If you like what you've heard, please head over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. For more Powerboat Talk, follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or visit our website at powerboattalk.com.